So thanks a lot for joining this talk. It's actually a pleasure to be here. It's my first Casual Connect, my first time to Amsterdam, and I'm indeed learning a lot. So I was asked by the organizers to speak about physics and physics in games and sort of what we should expect from physics in games in the next years to come. And that brought me to the idea of doing sort of a historical review of where we're coming from in terms of physics, and together with you guys maybe have a look into the crystal ball of what we might potentially expect in the next years to come. This is just my personal opinion. It doesn't necessarily in all means represent Havok's view. I'm taking a few guesses here. I'm happy enough to have a discussion later on. Quick introduction on Havok. I mean, Nick gave a quick overview already. We're in the games industry since 15 years. Meanwhile, we're Intel owned. A lot of games are using Havok. Actually, yeah, 7 out of 10 of the top games are using Havok for physics, destruction, cloth animation. So we're pretty big in the console business, and that's actually where we're coming from. So let's start with going back into the future, actually going back to the year 2000, the early days. This is how it all started. In 1999, a few guys in Dublin founded a company called Telekinesis Research, now named Havok. And we built the first physics engine and released that in 2000. Some great games on PC have been using the tech, such as Knight Rider. And as you can see on the screenshots, it's really fantastic graphics. It's absolutely stunning. So back then it was mostly PC, mostly car games, and it really was basic physics, but I can tell you we have been very proud. And we also did some first checks and tests with what we call soft body, which basically is cloth simulation. As you might realize from the screenshot, this was slightly suboptimal. So what I did when I prepared this presentation was I just had a look at the pure sheer computation power and how it evolved in the past years. This is going to be interesting in the next slides to come. So if you have a look at that, in 2000 when the first big console released, like PS2 and Xbox, we're talking about gigaflops, floating point operations power on CPU and GPU of roughly between 5 and 10 gigaflops. Back at the time, this was pretty impressive. Then in 2002, Havok went on to provide physics for consoles, and this was the first big step for everybody because a lot of the console games were actually using physics, especially the PlayStation 2, and they started to really push the limits in terms of physics back then. I digged out an old video using Havok physics in 2002, which shows what kind of physics were doable and feasible at the time back then. And back then, this was really a game changer. I know it's hard to believe now, but this was really a big thing. So you will see some basic physics and stuff happening and a little bit of fun already. And then Nick indicated already, in 2004, this was the first big milestone for physics in games. A game called Half-Life 2, developed by Valve, hit the shelves. It was using Havok technology as well. And what they did for the first time, and this really was a game changer, they not only used physics for just making the world look more lifelike, they used physics as a gameplay element. And this really changed the game. And if you play games now, today, pretty much every game is using physics as a gameplay element. I guess the best example how gameplay physics looks like is the famous gravity gun. I have a little video here that shows what you can actually do with that. It's a little bit dark, I'm sorry. I played that game as well, I loved it. Throwing around things. It's all about fun. So, horsepower. Then the next generation of consoles hit the market, the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360, and notably the first iPhone. And as you can see, that's a tremendous increase in sheer horsepower and sheer computation power that was available. And that basically, game developers always love to leverage computation power, led to the next evolution game. So then all of a sudden game developers thought, well, physics is nice, but I'd actually like to have fully destructible game scenes. I'd like to take the player, give him a gun, and let him shoot down the entire environment, the gears, and let it break up. I want to have this, everything. And then a Hollywood producer called John Woo entered the gaming industry and built a game called Stranglehold back then in 2007. And that was the first big game in Milestone that used heavily destructible environments, game scenes, and up to a limit we're not seen before. And that actually led to a new product on Havok's side. We launched a product called Havok Destruction, and Stranglehold sort of was the reason for that product. I have a small video showcasing that title as well. And that looks pretty impressive already. So as you can see, the player really fully interacts with the entire scene, with everything that's going on. And that's just huge fun. And then from 2008 to 2012, we basically entered an era of adoption. Physics went all over the place. You couldn't imagine a game, especially on consoles or PC, that wouldn't have physics in it. And game developers really pushed the limits to the extreme. We had to put physics on the Wii, which was, sorry Nintendo, not the easiest thing to do. We had to optimize as much as we can. People started to use a lot of cloth, and PlayStation 3 with the SPUs, which are pretty powerful in theory and in practice, but sort of a pain in the butt to optimize for. So we really invested a lot of research and development to getting the most and the max out of it. And the result that basically led to a number of really great games. I put a few box shots down there. They're all using Havok physics and destruction and cloth, including some of the Uncharted, for instance, was a big thing on the PlayStation. And ultimately, it was all about giving the player more fun. And one of the examples about fun for me is certainly a game called Battlefield that some of you might know from Electronic Arts. And they really pushed the limit and up to the point, and this is probably the most famous scene of Battlefield, and everybody playing Battlefield probably tried to do that as well. I never achieved that, I was too stupid. But this was really the next evolution of physics in games. And that's real time. So, then the next and the latest and the current console generation hit the market, the PlayStation 4, the Xbox One, and as you can see, the iPhone 5. And please note, the iPhone 5 has more computation power, way more computation power than the Xbox or the PlayStation 2 back then, which is pretty impressive considering how big it is. And as you can see, that console generation pushed the computation power limit again to the extreme. We're now talking teraflops rather than gigaflops. However, we have to note that a lot of the computation increase was actually around GPU and not CPU, since rendering in GPU still tends to be the bottleneck in gaming. So CPU power did increase, but not as much as GPU. At the same time, Havok did a lot of innovation, so we took the 10 years of experience and basically took the product we had so far, threw it away, started a research project in 2011, put the 15 best engineers in the company on that project and said to them, look, build a new engine, a new physics engine. It needs to run on all consoles, on mobile and everything, but needs to be much faster. And the guys worked 2 years on that technology with lots of ups and downs, and in the end we released a new core, a new Havok physics core in 2013, mid-2013, which ultimately was 5 to 10 times faster on the same scenes and same machines than the previous Havok technology and other physics engines in the market, which basically, in addition to the additional hardware power, enabled game developers to make use of physics even more. And a great example of that one is Destiny, which has been released the last year. And as you all know, was a huge, tremendous financial success. But a huge project as well. And Destiny is using a number of Havok technologies as well. So this is where we are today. And now the big question is the pink elephant in the room. What's going to happen in the next 5 years? Well, I don't know, but I have a few ideas maybe. And this is what I would like to talk about. Oh, I'm good in time. So first of all, technically spoken, we will definitely see a further increase of gameplay entities. So we'll, in other words, it's just going to be more on screen, even more players, more cars, more stuff. If you see how that evolved in the past years, it's actually pretty impressive. And I predict this is going to be hundreds of thousands of entities in the future. Then what we're seeing is that physics is hitting mobile and tablets now. So a number of our customers, and one of the biggest ones is Game Loft in Montreal. They're using Havok physics on the iPhone and the iPad, and really push the limits there. I mean, I'll show a video in a few seconds, and what they did on the iPhone is actually pretty impressive and almost console level quality. They don't use ragdoll and destruction yet, and I think it's just a matter of time until this is going to happen. But we're definitely going to see more titles like this. Sorry. The next big area where I do believe we're going to see a lot of evolution is 3D MMO games. If you have a look at the traditional 3D MMO games, such as World of Warcraft, it's great, it's fun, it's huge, but there's not a lot of physics going on for a number of reasons. We now see the first 3D MMO titles or large online titles that are actually making use of destructible environments, making use of physics. They're optimizing physics on their servers and enabling online players to sort of get a console-style destructible environment feeling in PC online games as well. A great example of that is actually World of Tanks, which probably some of you might know. It's a small game earning a lot of money, a big company. And they actually adopted Havok Destruction for their next generation of World of Tanks. And what the result is actually pretty convincing. So as you can see, this is fully destructible, interactive, just like on a console, but this is running online. And again, it's all about fun. Then we definitely will see more physics going on consoles, much more physics going on consoles. I don't know exactly how many titles we have in development at Havok right now on consoles. I guess it's something like 50 or 60. And part of that is just incredible. One of the titles that really impressed me a lot is a title called Rainbow Siege. It's not released yet. It's supposed to be released sometime this year, early next year. And they really took a bold next step. It's pretty impressive. So this is a great example of how much physics you can actually do in a game and how much physics is influencing the actual gameplay. And then there is the cloud. Everybody's talking about the cloud. The previous guy talking from Google was talking about the cloud. The cloud is everywhere. The cloud is the holy grail. It's a logic question why we wouldn't leverage the cloud for physics computation in games, obviously. And in theory, there is a lot of potential doing that because it's endless computation power, and physics is about computation, isn't it? So that's the theory, but on the other hand, there's lots of unknowns as well. I mean, starting from how much do you compute in the cloud, how much do you need to compute on the iPhone or the console itself? Does it need to be a hybrid model? How do I exchange the data in between? We still have this unsolved problem of latency, and we still have the problem of bandwidth. Sure, in cities like Amsterdam, we're going to have a great bandwidth, but what about the guys somewhere, I don't know, in Africa? They don't have a great bandwidth, but you want to have them as a player as well. So ultimately, there's going to be a lot of R&D to be done here to find out if the cloud is going to be the next big thing for physics. However, something is happening already. We do see first attempts, first games in the make that are leveraging the cloud in very closed ecosystems. And a great example of that is a game called Crackdown 3 from Microsoft. It's supposed to be released next year, I believe. And what they do is basically, it's an Xbox One game, but they're leveraging the cloud, Microsoft Azure cloud already, to compute part of the physics stuff in the cloud, stream back to the Xbox. So they're already using the cloud in a very limited closed ecosystem, but the result, and this is real time, is actually pretty impressive. So this basically is Hollywood-style physics in games in real time. Now, of course, the next big question is, what if we could use the power of the cloud to generate physics and use that on basically every gaming device, including iPhones, smart TVs, whatever you want. Doesn't matter. Just use the cloud and push it to the limit. The result would probably be Hollywood-style physics for any kind of game, for any gamer, on every device. Anytime, everywhere, and pretty much for free. Well, is this doable? I don't know. But as Havok, we certainly think it's pretty exciting, and it's definitely something we will look into. Perfectly on time. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Felix. Very interesting. Anyone have any questions? I have a couple, if no one does. So one question, when we were watching some of the scenes earlier, the battlefield example of destroying the building, I presume with the physics you could destroy that building from other angles and it would crumble in different ways.
Correct.
And so it becomes virtually endless in terms of how the physics can interact with the player. And that's
Correct.
true, yeah.
Correct.
And you see that coming to mobile platforms, tablets,
yes,
in the not too distant future.
That's what I'm seeing, yes. Yeah. The game Love title is a good example of what can be achieved on tablets and iPhones already. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the computation and the hardware specs of the iPhone 7, for instance, it's an Xbox 360, basically. Mm.
Great. Maybe you could speak a little bit also about the place of physics and Havok in general with VR, and how you see those two platforms merging and the contribution of physics in the virtual reality world.
Well, I think I have to answer twofold on that. So Havok's perspective clearly is we're supporting VR. It's a great thing. It's running already. We're supporting Oculus. We're closely watching what the guys at Magic Leap and Microsoft HoloLens are doing. It's all pretty exciting technology. In terms of VR, especially Oculus, it's a little bit tricky, since if you provide the gamer and the user with too much reality in this immersed system, you might actually overstress humans. So that's a bit of a... If you would have a game like the Battlefield on Oculus with sound, you might potentially get a heart attack. Yeah. So that's just my personal opinion. I'd be very cautious about using that kind of physics and destructions on Oculus.
Okay. We actually heard something to that effect earlier in the day.
Oh, okay.
Someone was speaking, Guy was speaking about too much data in a virtual reality environment actually is basically what you said. You can blow someone's head up. You have to be a little gentle with them.
Yes.
In that environment. And so how physics and VR interact, sort of you end up in this delicate balancing act. Yeah.
So in theory, we could build all of that for the Oculus platform, but I don't think you want to do that.
Okay, excellent. Anyone else?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Have a nice weekend.